What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So through the last several years, we've seen Microsoft and Sony embrace PC gaming more and more with a lot of the ports of their first-party intellectual properties, but Nintendo has always been the odd one out, at least until now, as new information has started to surface online showing they may be porting one of their big first-party IPs to PC. Kind of. We'll go over that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about some strange moves from Nintendo that have been noticed online and has kicked up a bunch of speculation around new Switch hardware. And we're also going to be talking about an update for Games with Gold that will be changing the service quite a bit going forward. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawnwave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And we're going to start today with Xbox Game Pass games for the month of July. We can head over here to news.xbox.com. They have a nice little card at the top showing off all of the different games. And available right now, we have Last Call BBS, that's on PC. And then we have a bunch of Yakuza games that are returning to the service, that being Zero, Kiwami, and Kiwami 2, all of those cloud, console, and PC. Moving to July 7th, we have DJ Max Respect 5, that's cloud, console, and PC. Matchpoint Tennis Championships, that's cloud, console, and PC. Road 96, cloud, console, and PC. Moving to July 14th, we have Escape Academy, console, and PC. My Friend Peppa Pig, which is a meme that I assume I'm just old, cloud, console, and PC. We have Overwhelm, that's on PC. Paw Patrol, the movie Adventure City Calls, cloud, console, and PC. And then we have Power Wash Simulator, cloud, console, and PC. So to me, the big additions here are the ones returning, that being the different Yakuza games. People have wondered which one is like a good one to start with. Yakuza 0 for a lot of people is the recommendation, and hey, they're all just added back in the Game Pass. Might be a good one to check out there. Also, we had talked previously in Newswave about Lollipop Chainsaw potentially making a return, maybe in the form of a remake, and that has now been officially announced, coming next year in 2023 with no consoles like specified or anything. But we did get an entire letter from the producer, Mr. Yasuda, who you can see this here, says one thing that we have to tell fans of the original game is that even though the original staff are working on the remake, there will be elements that are different from the original. For instance, the original game had 16 licensed songs used in the soundtrack, but it is unfortunately difficult for us to implement all of them this time. As a result, aside from a few licensed tracks, the soundtrack will consist of new music. Additionally, since we have access to consoles with higher specifications, we'll be taking a more realistic approach to the graphics this time. They're kind of like cel-shaded, stylized visuals. I'm curious what it's going to look like then with the remake, but either way, this is good news because the game has just been stuck in that generation with like the 360 and the PS3. It hasn't been backwards compatible through like the Xbox backwards compatibility program on the Xbox One or the Xbox Series at all. The only way to really play it is to have one of those older systems just out right in front of you and playing it there. So I like the idea of a full remake for it. I'm curious if they go back and change anything around combat, controls, mechanics there, but either way, something definitely to be looking forward to next year. Oh, and it does look like we have a couple of events from Ubisoft coming up. One actually this week and another couple of months from now. We could see this posted up over on gamesindustry.biz. We have Ubisoft Forward Spotlight, that being for Skull and Bones specifically. That's Thursday, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And then a few months from now, that being September 10th, 12 p.m. Pacific time, we'll have the Ubisoft Forward event. This will be a multi-game showcase. So there are a few things we might see here. It's kind of a toss-up. I mean, there is an Assassin's Creed game that has been rumored, and I'm kind of thinking it's going to be sort of like how when we had Assassin's Creed Unity back in the day on the Xbox One and the PS4. We still got like an Assassin's Creed Rogue game for the previous generation. There is like this big Assassin's Creed live service thing happening at some point. This looks like it's going to be just its own game, so we can maybe look forward to that. Then, of course, there's Avatar, which seems like a big holiday release. And then Beyond Good and Evil 2 is apparently still in active development. I have a hard time believing that, but hey, maybe Ubisoft can change my mind here, that being on September 10th. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and PC. There have been talks in the past, for a while now, about Nintendo eventually moving some of their titles to PC. It's certainly a trend now that we've seen more and more from Sony, and Microsoft's just all in on PC at this point. Day one, it's coming to Xbox, coming to PC, coming to their Game Pass ecosystem. Well, in a new update to Mario Kart Tour, people started to notice some interesting lines of code that have been added. We can see this post up over on Reset Era, this from Mondo Mega, who at first points out that mouse has been added for input mode, and that didn't necessarily sell people on the idea of it having PC compatibility as like as a port of some kind, because that could be for like development purposes or something there. But a little further down, there are several lines of code like stream request emulation native, is requested emulation native, start send emulation native. You're seeing emulation pop up quite a bit here. And now people are believing this could be part of what Google is doing with their Google Play Games for PC initiative, which we can see is a platform that brings your Android game to PCs using high performance emulation with Android and Chrome OS cross-device play from a single code base. And it is kind of a funny situation though, if you think about it, because I don't believe that Nintendo would have in their mind gone, all right, let's definitely port this thing to PC. It has to be there. It's just sort of like it's there and this emulation is possible with this initiative. And they're like, hey, let's see what happens. I mean, obviously code is being added into the game to support this. I believe Nintendo would at least have to do some stuff here, whether it's through opting in or basically they would have to say, okay, yeah, we will attempt to have this on PC and kind of see what happens. I'm a little curious how Mario Kart Tour will control on PC, because that's like all touched. You have to use the mouse and like click and move the cart around that way. Will it have like keyboard controls? Hard to say there, but I don't think Nintendo is all of a sudden like, yeah, let's get everything on PC, but it is something to keep an eye on, because maybe this is a way for them to test the market on PC, just to see how many people are actually using it there and how much money, yes, they would be making on it. Because initially when they went to phones, that was kind of a big thing then, and they did Mario Kart Run. Didn't do as well out of the gate, really, at all. But then they tried like Fire Emblem Heroes, which is the gacha game with a ton of microtransactions and all this, and it's crossed $1 billion in revenue, which you hear about that, and now all these mobile games that Nintendo is doing makes a lot of sense. So I guess we'll see what happens here. It hasn't been made official. This was all through a data mining of an update that was pushed recently, but something tells me an announcement is going to be following here pretty soon for them to make it official, and we'll keep an eye out for it. Next up, let's talk about Nintendo and an investor question that has to do with security within the company, specifically around some of the malicious attacks that have been happening, I would say, in recent time, especially with Capcom having a ton of their stuff stolen and then basically held at ransom. And then we've also seen some pretty large malicious attacks on just e-commerce in general with like Home Depot and more there. Well, an investor asked about this and seemed to signal something like the Giga leak that many people are assuming and speculating came out of China with IQ, and also there was the company Broad on, I believe, that may have been involved with it. But asking about what measures they're taking, and this is what Mr. Furukawa had to say. We're taking a variety of initiatives to address information security threats and vulnerabilities. For the services we provide, initiatives include cooperating with outside specialists and conducting diagnostics to check for security issues. In addition, as part of our internal system for information security, we introduced the Information Security Management System in 2017 and have set up our Information Security Committee. Policies for information management have been established, and we have adopted both physical and technical countermeasures. In addition, we work to raise awareness of information security among our employees through training and other means. And this would be very important to an investor, because let's say there was a massive data breach at Nintendo and it had to do with payment details for customers, credit card information, all this. You would lose a lot of trust from consumers who you expect to have their credit cards on file for making purchases in the world where we're moving more towards a massive digital marketplace across the board. Like we already talked about the all digital future for games, but in a lot of places, it's already there. You're shopping on Amazon consistently and you have your card information saved there. All that needs to happen is a massive security breach. Your information gets stolen. You're like, I'm not keeping it there anymore. So obviously an investor wants to hear that Nintendo is doing everything possible in order to prevent that. The Giga leak was eye-opening because it did have, yes, a lot of information around protocols prototypes and game ideas and concepts and internal documents. It also had a lot of stuff for their own employees that just kind of got out there. So definitely good to press Nintendo on this as an investor. So good question there. And good to hear that Nintendo at least had a lot to say about the measures they're taking in order to prevent a big data breach and also protect customer and employee information. Next up, let's talk about Nintendo doing some strange things that have really caused speculation once again online around a new hardware announcement, which speculation has already been rampant since, well, 2017. But this is an interesting development, I will say, because it kind of lines up with history when it comes to Nintendo at least preparing some sort of announcement. We can see this posted up over on Go Nintendo saying Nintendo privates Switch videos leading to more Switch Pro speculation. They say, as discovered by user Lucas on the Fanboards forums, and it was also confirmed by another user, Milo, Nintendo has set 2 of the videos on their official North America channel to private, the trailers for the Switch Lite and the Switch OLED. Previously, these videos were both freely viewable by the public, but now are nowhere to be found. It's been pointed out that Nintendo also made the trailer for the Switch Lite private shortly before the reveal of the Switch OLED. And some people have said that, it was available to be viewed a few days ago, and now all of a sudden it's not. So it also appears to be region by region. For example, in Japan, the video is still there, whereas in like the US, it's not. The UK, some were saying it was, some were saying it wasn't. It's all over the place there. But it does appear that Nintendo is working to private some of the announcement trailers around like these different Switch models. And you might be wondering, why does that matter and why would Nintendo do that? Well, if there is a new hardware announcement coming, they would want to eliminate as many videos that could confuse consumers. You might see a product that's just not available in stores anymore, like if they announced a Switch Lite OLED and that regular Switch Lite is just pulled off stores and replaced with the OLED model. It would be kind of weird for a mom or a dad or a grandmother who's just on YouTube, I guess, seeing the commercial for that. And of course, in search results, they would want to free up anything that could take away from their new announcement. And that would be some of the older hardware announcements. As for the history side of things, Nintendo would typically announce new hardware in July. The Switch Lite, it was in July. The Redbox Switch, in July next to that Switch Lite. The Switch OLED, in July. So if Nintendo really does have any kind of new hardware that they are lining up for holiday release 2022, it's probably going to happen in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And if we get into August and there is no hardware announcement, then it's probably not happening this year. And hey, we can look forward to 2023 and we can start the Switch Pro cycle all over again. Now, the reason they would want to announce it in July is because manufacturing would probably start shortly thereafter, and we've seen it happen time and time again. Stuff just leaks out from the factory, people take pictures, they post them up on their favorite forum, and it happened with the PS5 with the shell, it happened with the Switch Lite with the back of it, and no one believed it. Nope, wait, that was real. So yeah, Nintendo would want to get out in front of it, and then of course spend the next couple of months ramping up marketing and promotion around potential September or October release. They at least have a few games in there that they could put it next to, and of course there are some games we haven't even heard about yet that are supposedly coming out this year.
Oh, and just before this video was about to be uploaded and sent out for the morning, we actually got another explanation that I think makes a ton of sense. This was posted up over on Twitter by Kit. Said these major videos typically have music or actors which are licensed for use over a year, then need to be renewed or taken down. Switch OLED was announced a year ago tomorrow. This is most likely nothing, that referring to Game Explain's video that went over the takedown or the private videos that were found. And yeah, this is probably the most likely situation currently. I mean, sure, it does make sense to pull the videos in order to make way for new advertisements and commercials for the Switch brand, but we can also fall back on the most likely of scenarios, the one that does make the most sense, and that being this right here from Kit. So hey, we'll see if anything happens in the next couple of weeks, and if not, we'll come back next year and do it all again.
And in our last bit of news, let's talk about an update for Xbox Live Games with Gold. There was an email that went out, and it looks like Microsoft has reached their limit for one of the console families that they were actually relying on quite heavily for this service. We can see this email is posted up by The Verge, saying from October 1st, 2022, the monthly games provided to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate and Xbox Live Gold members via Games with Gold will no longer include Xbox 360 titles. We have reached the limit of our ability to bring Xbox 360 games to the catalog. However, Games with Gold will continue to include exciting Xbox One titles and exclusive savings each month. They go on to say that any of the Xbox 360 games you downloaded before October 2022 won't be affected, or anything you're redeeming, anything like that. And I mean, at this point, the previous months, the best games were the Xbox 360 games, which wasn't great, obviously, because the service has been at its lowest point that I've ever seen. So I do wonder if Microsoft works to maybe taper this service off. Like, for example, they say in October is last month where that happens. Maybe in November they have 2 games and they're just Xbox One titles, and maybe one Xbox original. And then we get into 2023 and eventually it's like 1 game or something. They're trying to get people to move into Game Pass. We all know this. So at this point, it's just more of an obligation for them to throw something out there for Games with Gold. At least now, it should be Xbox One games, but who knows? We'll see what they come up for us in November after things run out for 360 games. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll I posted up yesterday, where I ask, do you think Nintendo will ever port one of their big first-party console games to PC? 91% say no. 9% say yes. I mean, it's hard to say at this point where we are 20 years from now, right? Like, I mean, 20 years ago looked way different than it does now. And I figure 10 years ago even, I mean, I wouldn't have said, yeah, Nintendo's going to be all over cell phones. I'll have a bunch of games. Fire Emblem will be there, Mario will be there, Mario Kart, Pikmin, Animal Crossing, and yet here we are with a lot of those Nintendo IPs on mobile phones. I guess that's treated a bit differently than just taking one of their console games, like let's say Mario Odyssey, and they port it to PC, but I guess never say never, because everything is constantly changing in the video game landscape. Something would probably have to go catastrophically wrong for Nintendo to not produce a console anymore, and they survived the Wii U, so I don't know what will knock them out if that didn't. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Tad, saying there's been an increase in 2022 with third-party devs locking their games to 30 FPS in both handheld and dock mode. It's official, we need new hardware. I just hope it is capable with a wider color gamut. I don't think the limited PS3 Lite color gamut is acceptable, caveat going forward. I think at this point, most people agree that it would be nice to have a new Switch from Nintendo, one that's just more powerful. Whereas like a year and a half ago, people seemed all right with it. They're like, yeah, we don't really need new hardware, but we're starting to see more and more of these third parties sacrifice heavily to get on the Switch. And then we're also seeing games like Age of Calamity really struggle on the current Switch. So I'm sold on the concept. I like the games that Nintendo is putting out. Obviously, some of the best rated titles in gaming history are on the Switch. But it's like that one thing with the hardware. It's like, if we could just get this just a bit stronger so that the games are locked 30, or they don't have to cut down to 30 from 60 with third-party devs, I think it'd be a much more enjoyable system at that point. But does Nintendo want to do that soon, or do they want to kind of just still wait things out until they're ready to start up the next generation, potentially a year or two from now? I guess we'll see here soon, because if they don't announce something this month, it could be into 2023, and at that point, you just go to the next generation a year later. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's Nintendo seemingly preparing Mario Kart Tour for its port to the PC. I mean, is this a sign of things to come, you think, for Nintendo? And then also, what about all the speculation around Nintendo, new hardware? Why else would they be privating these videos? And then Xbox Live Games with Gold. Do you think Microsoft slowly works away from that heading into 2023? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.